Arthur Cole limped through a dim Memphis alley just after midnight, one hand pressed to his bleeding cheek, the other gripping a phone that recorded the vicious confrontation moments earlier. At 68, he'd served 3 decades as a firefighter, an everyday hero who'd rescued countless neighbors from smoke-filled homes, earning the honorary title Chief even after retirement. Neighbors whispered and craned their necks out of half-shuttered windows, aghast at the sight. The once indomitable rescuer, battered and breathless, staggering through flickering streetlight. Only hours ago, Arthur had taken his usual sunset walk, greeting folks on their porches and exchanging neighborly nods. That routine, his way of staying connected to a community he loved, had always felt as safe and as comforting as a worn-in coat. This time, though, his stroll ended when Officer Darren Holt, a wiry cop with icy eyes and a permanent scowl, blocked his path under a broken street lamp. Arthur had heard murmurs about Holt. Locals warned he was a bully with a badge, the kind who eyed every black man like a target, inventing offenses to justify aggression. Yet Arthur believed, or at least hoped, he could diffuse the tension if it arose. He was old enough and had been through enough fires, literal and figurative, to stay calm in the face of intimidation. When Holt stepped forward and demanded to see ID, Arthur calmly asked why. Holt's lips thinned, suspicion curdling into hostility. The confrontation escalated with lightning speed. Holt fired off insults, seized Arthur's arm, and struck him across the face. Blood trickled down Arthur's chin, hot and coppery. A small crowd began to gather. Passers-by, a young woman in braids filming from her phone, and an older man leaning on his cane. Though rattled, Arthur refused to cower. He squared his shoulders and locked eyes with Holt, quietly announcing that he had every right to walk these streets. That quiet challenge enraged Holt. He grabbed Arthur's collar, slammed him against a brick wall, and barked into his radio as if Arthur were armed and dangerous. Yet the crowd's presence and their phone cameras compelled Holt to step back. Sensing that too many eyes were on him, he retreated to his cruiser, muttering dire promises that this was far from over. A few neighbors rushed to Arthur's side, urging him to see a doctor. He waved them off, determined not to show weakness. Wiping blood from his lip with the back of his hand, he walked away on shaky legs. Arthur believed, or tried to believe, he'd weathered the worst of it, that Holt's fury would subside once the officer realized any fabricated charges would crumble under the crowd's video evidence. But as Arthur reached his small home, an aging bungalow with chipped paint and sagging porch steps, he couldn't ignore the gnawing sense that Holt would return. The cop's final glare had carried a threat beyond mere posturing. Inside, Arthur pressed a bag of frozen peas to his swollen cheek and debated calling his daughter, Mia, who lived across town. He didn't want to scare her, but he also felt the need to document everything in case Holt doubled down. The phone in his hand still held the recording from the street. Maybe that would protect him, or maybe it would only stoke Holt's rage. He told himself he'd decide by morning, hoping a night's rest would restore the calm. Yet, in neighborhoods battered by biased policing, there's little calm to be found. Morning arrived with a stomach-churning jolt. Arthur woke to insistent pounding at his door and the frantic wail of sirens outside. 2 cops shoved their way in as soon as he turned the knob. One was Officer Holt himself, eyes glowing with vindictive triumph. He shoved a transparent bag under Arthur's nose, a switchblade inside. "Your knife, huh?" Holt hissed. "Found it right near where you attacked me last night." Arthur's disbelief flared into outrage. He tried explaining that Holt had been the aggressor, that half a dozen people witnessed the assault, but the second cop, a stocky man with a shaved head, just twisted Arthur's arm behind his back and slapped on cuffs. In a dizzy blur, Arthur found himself driven to the precinct. The phone video from the previous night vanished from his pocket, likely snatched by Holt or his cronies in the scuffle. No Miranda rights, no hearing, just hours in a cramped interrogation room, with Holt smirking from across the table. "Told you this wasn't over," the officer sneered. He spoke of a witness who supposedly saw Arthur wielding a blade, claimed Arthur threatened the officer's life, and alleged that the old man snapped. Arthur seethed, fists clenched, but refused to play into their narrative. He repeatedly asked to make a call or show his bruises, the truth etched on his face. The cops only sneered back. Eventually, they flung open the door, setting him free with a half smirk. "We'll let the courts handle your meltdown, Chief. Don't go far." By the time Arthur trudged onto the sidewalk, the sun sat high, and sweat prickled his bruised temple. News vans lined the street, their cameras pivoting his way. Within minutes, local headlines declared, "Retired firefighter attacks officer in drunken rage." Holt had evidently wasted no time feeding the media a fabricated story, perhaps a claim that Arthur was stumbling and violent, forcing Holt to subdue him. Lacking the phone video, Arthur's side was overshadowed by an avalanche of official-sounding statements. Feeling helpless, he realized he needed outside help. That same afternoon, his neighbor Lamar, a wiry 30-something who used to be an EMT, found him sitting on his porch steps. Lamar offered a ride downtown to see an attorney named Talia Scott, rumored to specialize in civil rights suits and police misconduct. Talia's office stood on the third floor of a battered brick building, with mismatched furniture and stacks of case files. She listened intently as Arthur recounted the confrontation on Beale Street, the slap, the crowd filming, the abrupt arrest at home. Lamar added that he heard rumors about Holt's habit of terrorizing locals, especially older black residents. Talia nodded, flipping through a battered legal pad. "We can file a formal complaint," she said, her voice measured, "but we'll need more evidence. If your phone recording's gone, we must track down other footage or witness statements." The next day, Talia found a handful of people who'd posted videos of that night on social media, but the content was quickly drowned by channels running a shorter, doctored clip, courtesy of Holt's allies. On local news, Arthur's mild attempt at self-defense was edited to look like aggression. Meanwhile, the part where Holt slapped him? Strangely absent. Talia prepared an affidavit, citing the uncut clips they could find, along with statements from neighbors. She urged patience. "We'll get him." Arthur tried to focus on that hope, even as messages from friends hinted that the city's power structure might shield Holt. Then, in a chilling escalation, Arthur's house went up in flames. At 2 a.m, he awoke to sirens and the acrid smell of burning wood. An arson job, the fire inspector said. Onlookers recognized Holt's cruiser lurking nearby. Arthur stood in his driveway, smoke-stung eyes taking in the charred skeleton of his garage, heart pounding with fury. Holt had clearly grown bolder. The man wanted Arthur broken, no matter the cost. In the days following, everything unraveled faster than Arthur could patch the holes. He lost the modest insurance payout on the house due to arson suspicion. The company suspected he might have set the blaze himself for attention. At the local diner, where Arthur often had breakfast, management suddenly asked him not to come back, citing harassing phone calls from people calling him a dangerous thug. That was Holt's handiwork, obviously, but proving it was another matter. Even the elementary school children Arthur once mentored heard gossip from parents claiming chief-turned-criminal. The rumor mill spun so wildly that Talia admitted she'd never seen a smear campaign escalate this fast. Despite the chaos, Arthur refused to hide. Lamar introduced him to a small team of amateur investigators, high school classmates who'd become tech-savvy activists, willing to dig into Holt's background. Late one night, they discovered a trove of suspicious data, patterns of complaints that were dismissed, hush-money allegations, and anonymous tips about Holt bragging in bars about beating respect into whomever he pleased. It felt like gold. Talia believed if they presented this evidence alongside any raw footage of Arthur's assault, they could blow Holt's credibility to pieces. The only snag, Holt's circle of cop buddies, plus certain bigwigs, had a track record of purging official records or intimidating witnesses. Arthur's circle had to move quickly. Local activism flared on Beale Street after a second confrontation, where Holt claimed Arthur was inciting a riot. This time, the officer arrived with off-duty goons, throwing bottles and sparking bedlam among peaceful marchers. The news reported it as a mob led by disgruntled ex-firefighter Arthur Cole. Talia sighed that night, flipping through a thick folder of false arrests. "He's upping the ante," she told Arthur, "staging violence and blaming you." Meanwhile, online trolls doxed Arthur's address. He found vile threats scrawled across his front door and bricks through his window. It was around that time that Arthur's daughter Mia pleaded with him to stay at her apartment. She was petrified by the swirling rumors and hostility. He stubbornly insisted on sleeping in his own battered home, refusing, he said, to hand it over to Holt's intimidation. One evening, though, Mia showed up with groceries to find the door kicked in, the living room trashed, and a spray-painted message, Next time, it'll be you. Arthur relented and packed a single duffel bag, moving into Mia's tiny place. 2 nights later, Holt and 3 other cops pulled up outside that apartment complex. Mia was returning from a store run with dinner ingredients when she saw them huddled in the hall. Holt lunged forward, planting a small bag of narcotics in Mia's grocery bag, then caught her red-handed. By the time Arthur raced out, she was already in cuffs. "Possession with intent to distribute," Holt declared, smirking as cameras filmed. Mia's muffled protests fell on deaf ears. Desperate, Arthur confronted Holt. "She's never touched that stuff, and you know it." Holt's only reply was a mocking shrug. In the swirl of uniformed officers, Mia was hauled away to a squad car. The next morning, the local news splashed their newest headline: "Ex-firefighter's daughter linked to drug ring, father the prime instigator." Talia scrambled to post bail, but the figure was astronomical, courtesy of a judge rumored to be tight with Holt. Public sentiment, fueled by manipulated news, shifted again. Arthur watched, numb, as the tide turned in the city he'd once protected with all his heart. He still had piles of dirt on Holt, yet each time he tried to use it, another wave of conspiracies hammered him from a new angle. Arthur's will nearly collapsed when Mia remained stuck behind bars for over a week, the bail too high for him to conjure on short notice. Talia worked her network of colleagues, searching for angle after angle to expose Holt's corruption or force a bail reduction. She found a missing puzzle piece in the form of Lamar's cousin, a bartender who recognized Holt's face from certain after-hours events. "He bragged about planting evidence," the bartender said, sending Talia an audio snippet of Holt slurring drunken boasts about teaching that old man and his brats a lesson. Talia's eyes gleamed as she replayed that snippet for Arthur. "This might be enough to chop off one of Holt's main lies," she told him. "Let's get it in front of a judge fast." Within 48 hours, Talia secured an emergency hearing. Arthur arrived with Lamar, shoulders squared despite raw exhaustion. The prosecutor sneered at them, but soon squirmed when Talia played the bartender's audio. It revealed Holt referencing fake dope and an easy frame job. Although the judge seemed unsettled, he maintained a stony composure, only lowering Mia's bail a fraction. Still, it was enough for Talia's resources to cover. When Mia walked free, father and daughter embraced in the courtroom's back hallway, tears cutting through weeks of tension. For a split second, Arthur believed they'd gained an upper hand. That glimmer of hope dimmed almost immediately when Holt's cronies struck again. The following evening, someone hurled Molotov cocktails into a peaceful candlelight vigil that Mia and Arthur attended outside the detention center. Flames ripped through the crowd, scattering them as police arrived and lobbed tear gas without questions. In the chaos, local media pinned the violence on Arthur Cole's radical supporters. The detective assigned to investigate was rumored to be Holt's old partner. Predictably, no charges landed on the real culprits. The story soared on social media, splitting public opinion. Half the city believed Arthur was orchestrating these stunts to gain sympathy, while the other half insisted Holt was the real puppet master, orchestrating chaos to bury Arthur's name. Talia convinced a major Memphis journalist to run a feature piece about Holt's questionable background, complete with witness accounts. By next morning, Holt's suspension was announced with bold headlines: "Officer under investigation for possible evidence tampering." It seemed like a major victory, one that might finally cut away Holt's protective shield. But, as always, Holt refused to go quietly. A day into his suspension, an unmarked sedan rolled up at Mia's apartment complex. 2 masked men stepped out, shot up the front window, and sped away. Arthur, inside the building, dived for cover as shards of glass rained across the living room. Heart pounding, he checked on Mia, who'd been in the bathroom at the time. She stumbled out wide-eyed, but unharmed. In the hallway, neighbors shouted frantic questions about who would do such a thing. Arthur's voice trembled with fury as he told them about Holt's vendetta. In less than 24 hours, the building management served Arthur and Mia an eviction notice, citing safety concerns for the other tenants. The father-daughter duo found themselves effectively homeless, their reputations battered. A small group of supporters from the vigil offered them a vacant back room in a local community center, an improvised safe spot. Lamar arrived hauling an old mattress in his truck, and Talia joined them there, vowing, "We'll fight from this vantage point if we must." Even so, Arthur felt the ground shifting under him, as though he stood on a sinking island while the floodwaters of Holt's corruption kept rising. Operating out of the community center's dusty back room, Talia, Arthur, Mia, and Lamar formed a kind of ad hoc war council. The walls were patched with posters reading, "Justice for All" and "End Police Abuse." Rows of laptops and phone chargers sat on collapsible tables. Talia's phone rang incessantly, either from tipsters claiming to have new intel on Holt, or from anxious supporters warning of fresh lies popping up in local news threads. Meanwhile, Lamar's activist friends poured in at odd hours, tapping away at code to dig deeper into Memphis PD's records. Within 3 days, they hit what felt like gold, a digital paper trail linking Holt to off-the-books payments from a city council member's discretionary fund, apparent hush money used to bury earlier brutality complaints. Another file revealed that, 5 years prior, Holt had been named in a wrongful death lawsuit, which the department settled quietly out of court. Talia hammered out a comprehensive motion to reopen the dropped claims, intending to expose Holt's pattern of violence and sabotage. As she read the final draft aloud, Arthur's battered face lit with a mixture of fierce pride and raw exhaustion. They scheduled a press conference right in the community center gym, hoping to break the cycle of doctored media segments. On the morning of the event, something unexpected happened. Holt was arrested. According to Talia's contacts, internal affairs had caved under mounting evidence. He was charged with assault, evidence tampering, and potential civil rights violations. The local TV station swarmed the story. Suspended Officer Darren Holt in custody. Arthur, though battered and homeless, breathed a ragged sigh of relief. Was it finally over? It seemed that way for about 2 days. Mia scrolled social media, beaming at how hashtags calling for Holt's prosecution climbed into trending, but trouble reappeared when Lamar saw a leaked memo indicating that certain high-ranking officials had little interest in letting Holt go down alone. "He knows too much," Lamar explained grimly, "so he'll use any leverage he has." Sure enough, a wave of new headlines hit. Rumors that Arthur had faked the Molotov attacks, that Mia's entire drug charge was organized drama, and that Lamar's group was terrorizing the city with false stories. "It's Holt's final gambit," Talia said, scanning the memo. "He's staging a bigger fiasco from behind bars, shifting blame onto you all as the ringleaders." Then came the worst blow. A black SUV tried to run Arthur down while he and Lamar were on their way to speak with investigators. The vehicle veered at them near a narrow intersection, forcing Lamar to swerve, slamming their borrowed car into a lamppost. Arthur's ribs, not fully healed, took another jolt. By the time they crawled out, the SUV was gone, but the message was clear. Even Holt's arrest had done nothing to blunt his network's reach. Back at the community center, Talia retreated into her makeshift office, firing off urgent emails to federal contacts, demanding a protective order. She emerged after midnight, hair frazzled, a glint of determined rage in her eyes. "We have enough to bury Holt," she insisted, tapping her laptop. "I've compiled every known complaint, witness statement, and contradictory official memo. Tomorrow, we present it to a judge for a sweeping indictment. Anyone who colluded with him included." Arthur nodded, the bandages across his torso tight under his ragged shirt. He barely dared to hope, yet something in Talia's unwavering tone made him believe that justice might be within reach. Mia and Lamar traded cautious smiles. Early the next morning, phone alerts buzzed in a staccato chorus. "Breaking, Officer Holt escapes custody in brazen jailbreak." The lines of text blurred before Arthur's tired eyes. That single sentence shattered the fragile optimism. Holt was free again, an unhinged man with everything to lose and a thirst for payback. Instantly, a knot of dread twisted in Arthur's gut. He looked at Talia, whose face had gone pale, and realized they had mere hours, if that, before Holt struck again. A storm rolled in that night, thunder rumbling above the city as if matching the tension in Arthur's weary bones. Holt's jailbreak electrified social media, fueling rumors that he was already prowling around Memphis. Some claimed to see him near abandoned warehouses by the river. Others said he'd been spotted leaving a seedy motel on the outskirts. Talia, looking over new intel, speculated Holt might aim for one final act to bury Arthur and undermine the building federal case. Fear coiled around the community center's hallways, each staffer glancing around corners as if expecting Holt to burst in with a gun. They didn't have to wait long. Around midnight, a black van sped toward the community center's side entrance. Several men hopped out, brandishing weapons. Arthur, Mia, Lamar, and Talia were in the gym, assembling printed case files for the next day's hearing when the intruders barged in. Shots rang out, punching holes through folding chairs and whizzing off the concrete walls. Talia screamed for everyone to take cover behind a portable stage setup. The shuffle of feet and adrenaline-charged gasps filled the echoing hall. Arthur peered through a gap in the stage curtains, heart pounding. There stood Holt, eyes wild, aiming a rifle at the stack of documents. He fired, igniting small flames as bullets tore into scattered papers. Smoke curled into the air, acrid and stinging. "You thought you could lock me up forever?" Holt roared, voice raw. "You've got no idea who I've got backing me?" Arthur clenched his fists, anger flaring bright as his battered ribs. He grabbed a nearby fire extinguisher, some vestige of his old life, and crawled around the stage's edge, ignoring Talia's warning hiss. With a silent nod to Lamar, who crouched close by, Arthur charged. Lamar hurled a metal folding chair at Holt, distracting him for a split second. Arthur heaved the extinguisher upward in an arc, slamming it into the rifle. Holt's shot went wide, echoing in the cavernous gym. Mia and Talia dashed out from cover, seizing the moment to pull more case files to safety. Holt recovered too quickly, cracking the rifle butt across Arthur's shoulder. Pain lit up his nerves, but rage kept him standing. He swung the extinguisher again, knocking Holt off balance. Meanwhile, the men who'd arrived with Holt fired chaotic shots at the stage and ceiling. Lamar ducked and rolled, snatching a phone to film the pandemonium. One bullet shattered a window near the high rafters, letting in sheets of rain from the storm outside. Talia, trembling but resolute, crawled behind the scattered boxes of legal documents. She clutched a final USB flash drive loaded with the compiled evidence. She stuffed it into her jacket pocket, determined not to let it burn. Holt bellowed at his accomplices. "Torch everything and grab that lawyer's files." They doused a corner of the gym with gasoline, flicking a lighter to spark a blaze. Flames licked up the wooden floor. Arthur managed to knock Holt's rifle away, but the officer swung a sidearm from his holster. A muzzle flash lit the gloom as a bullet grazed Lamar, who crumpled with a pained cry. Mia screamed, racing to his side, pressing a jacket against his bleeding leg. Smoke swirled overhead. Then came the wail of approaching sirens. The cavalry, or more cops loyal to Holt. The men with guns glanced at Holt, tension rippling across them. Their window of time was gone. The group bolted, dragging Holt with them, leaving the gym streaked with bullet holes and flickering fire. Talia scrambled to a wall-mounted extinguisher. Arthur's old training hammered in her mind, and she doused the flames, saving the building from complete destruction. By the time uniformed police entered, the gunmen were gone. On social media, watchers around Memphis reported glimpses of the black van barreling through red lights, vanishing into the stormy night. Arthur exhaled, dropping to his knees, every battered muscle quivering. Lamar moaned, gripping his leg. Mia and Talia called for an ambulance. The devastation was intense. Blood smears, scorched paper, broken glass. But the USB still rested safely in Talia's pocket. Through a haze, Arthur realized that maybe, just maybe, they'd saved the crucial evidence from Holt's final assault. 2 days after that harrowing gunfight, Arthur sat in a wheelchair at the city courthouse. Lamar's bullet wound was healing under hospital care, and Mia hovered protectively by her father's side. Talia was there too, suit rumpled yet determined, leading them to a monumental hearing. A wave of legal filings demanded a broad federal probe, not only into Holt, but also into the corners of Memphis PD that kept him afloat. In the halls, reporters clamored for quotes. They trailed after Arthur, snapping photos of his bandaged shoulder and the bruises that lined his face like war medals. Inside the courtroom, a solemn hush fell. The judge, a stern woman with iron-gray hair, read Talia's compiled briefs, scanning page after page of evidence that Talia and Lamar's group had uncovered: hush money payouts, brutality logs, official memos from high places that guaranteed Holt's impunity. Every line eroded the cops' carefully woven lies. Talia called witness after witness. One older man wept as he recalled being harassed by Holt for years. A young mother testified that Holt once threatened to arrest her toddler for loitering. Each account hammered home the same conclusion. Holt was a twisted piece of a bigger puzzle. Then the cherry on top. Talia introduced the USB from the gym standoff, showing the judge the final version of the labyrinthine data. The files laid out a pattern of conspiracy linking Holt to certain top brass in the department, plus a shadowy ring of enforcers who took orders outside official channels. Gasps rippled through the packed benches. The judge's expression tightened like a clenched fist. She called for a recess. Holt, captured again during a dawn raid on a motel, was brought into the hearing in shackles. He glowered across the room at Arthur, his face twisting with open hate. Meanwhile, the lead prosecutor announced updated charges for Holt: attempted murder, arson, kidnapping, plus federal civil rights infractions. The rest of the hush money ring was also named in warrants. For the first time, the officer who'd started this with a slap on Beale Street looked shaken, cornered by a storm he no longer controlled. Arthur, though trembling from the physical toll, felt something inside him lighten. He squeezed Mia's hand. As the hearing wound down, the judge addressed Arthur directly, acknowledging his relentless stand. She commended him for not yielding when threatened, praising Talia's unstoppable legal assault. But, the judge cautioned, these revelations indicate a deeper rot in the system. She ordered a widespread federal investigation into the PD. The crowd erupted in applause. Outside, under glaring afternoon sun, the media swarmed them. Arthur stood tall, ignoring the throbbing in his shoulder. Holt didn't act alone, he told the cameras. We beat him today, but the fight isn't done. Talia, Mia, and Lamar echoed his sentiment, vowing to see it through. News of the scandal rippled nationwide, turning Arthur's name into a rallying cry for accountability. That night, Arthur and Mia returned to the community center for the first time without fear of a sudden ambush. Talia gently insisted he rest. He stared at the battered place, bullet holes riddling the walls, black scorch marks still visible on the gym floor. The melted firefighter's badge lay in his jacket pocket, a reminder that heroism is tested beyond mere rescue missions. He turned it over in his hands, then looked at Mia. We're not just survivors, he said softly. We're builders. Let's rebuild something stronger. She nodded, tears forming, relief and pride glimmering in her eyes. In the following weeks, Memphis shifted beneath their feet. Federal agents descended on the precinct, seizing records. Headlines chronicled more suspensions and arrests among Holt's accomplices. An ex-detective who doctored videos, a judge tied to unexplained payouts, and 2 off-duty cops suspected of throwing Molotov cocktails at that candlelight vigil. Mainstream coverage slowly corrected the false storylines that had tarnished Arthur's name, though it couldn't erase the heartbreak endured. Despite the legal victories, Arthur had trouble sleeping, jolting awake at the faintest sounds. Sometimes he'd dream of that first slap on Beale Street, or the hiss of flames devouring his garage. Mia still flinched when phones buzzed unexpectedly, fearing another threat or midnight brick through the window. Lamar used a cane while his leg healed, but he stayed unstoppable in gathering testimonies from survivors of Holt's brutality. We're shining light into every corner, he told local news. If we don't, they'll bury it again. The community center gym remained scarred by bullet holes, but folks pitched in to patch what they could. A volunteer construction crew hammered plywood over shattered sections, and kids painted fresh murals proclaiming hope. Arthur spent long afternoons helping them, ignoring the ache in his ribs as he guided young hands. The new mural featured a stylized version of his battered badge, ringed with flames that transformed into vines and flowers, symbolizing life reborn from ashes. Media outlets extended overdue apologies, though many were half-baked, more concerned about their ratings than sincerity. Talia pressed forward with a class-action lawsuit for others targeted by Holt's network. She always made sure to credit Arthur's stoic courage and the street-level journalists, neighbors filming on phones, who refused to let truth be snuffed out. Meanwhile, financial restitution began trickling in for Arthur, Mia, and others. The state recognized the arson was obviously Holt's doing, reversing the prior insurance denial. Arthur used part of the funds to help rebuild the community center as a safer haven, determined that no one else would live in fear of a corrupt badge. On a hazy afternoon, while removing charred boards from the center's old storage room, Arthur paused. He glimpsed his reflection in a cracked mirror, gray hair, bruised skin, tired eyes, and realized how far he'd come from that naive evening walk. He'd lost a sense of certainty, but he'd gained unstoppable resolve. He pressed a hand to the melted badge in his jacket pocket, remembering each blow he'd survived. He let out a slow breath. This war wasn't fully won. Entrenched power runs deep, but he and everyone at the center had lit a fire no one could extinguish. In the months that followed, Holt was formally convicted on multiple felony counts. The federal probe uncovered over a dozen complicit individuals, supervisors, judges, city council figures, caught red-handed in a web of bribes and intimidation. When the sentencing day arrived, cameras flashed as Holt, shackled and sullen, was escorted to a transport van bound for a high-security facility. Arthur stood on the courthouse steps, flanked by Mia, Lamar, and Talia, each bearing bruises of a battle that spanned the city's dingiest alleys and the highest corridors of power. The crowd roared, a chorus demanding accountability beyond just one cop. That evening, Arthur attended a community rally at the newly renovated center. Dozens of residents shared stories, some heartbreaking, others emboldened by the final proof that corruption could be challenged. Lamar limped onto the stage with a cane, delivering a rousing speech about the everyday folks who braved cameras and trolls. Talia announced a new civil rights legal fund in memory of those wrongfully arrested or blackmailed by Holt. Mia described her harrowing hours in a jail cell, encouraging neighbors to keep filming, to keep standing up for each other. Arthur concluded the night, stepping up to the mic. The hush in the gym was profound. Soft lights illuminated the bright murals children had painted over bullet holes. The melted firefighter badge glittered at his chest, pinned near his heart, a battered symbol of the place he'd once held in Memphis, and the place he held now. He addressed the crowd in a gentle, steady tone, his gaze drifting over the once scorched floor where bullets had hissed. "I used to believe a badge stood for honor," he said. Then a man named Darren Holt twisted it into a shield for hatred. We all fought back, but that victory cost us dearly. Lives upended, nightmares that'll linger. Pausing, he inhaled the sweet scent of fresh paint. Yet, we're still here. Even if there are deeper shadows in the system, we keep shining light. We don't bow down anymore. We don't walk away with heads low. Thunderous applause erupted, mingled with tears. Arthur felt Mia's arm slip around his shoulders, warmth and relief radiating in that simple gesture. Lamar gave a thumbs up from the sidelines, Talia wiping at her eyes. In that moment, exhaustion and pain melted into collective pride. After the rally, as folks meandered out, one quiet voice rose. A teenage girl who used to fear walking past Holt's beat told Arthur, "You gave us hope, Chief." He nodded, words failing him. The city was still broken in many ways, and the powerful network behind Holt might regroup. But for now, Memphis had seen a slice of justice. Arthur turned to the mural of the swirling flames morphing into flowers. He thought of every bruise, every neighbor who refused to give in, every phone camera that stayed rolling despite fear. His story, beaten, framed, dragged through smoke and bullets, stood as a testament to courage in the face of systemic rot. Some battles endure, but the sparks of this one had already rippled far beyond the battered walls of that old community center. Arthur Cole felt the battered badge pressing over his heart, a final reminder that honor, tested by scorching trials, could still emerge stronger than any corrupt uniform.